Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our seminar. I am Putra Wibawa. It is my honor to be a moderator for this season. In this season, we will talk about video game narrative, a walkthrough of children, popular culture, and formal education by Ruth Martinez Borda. This material will talk about a video game narrative that will be a cultural and educational tools for the most people nowadays. First of all, may I briefly introduce to you our guest speaker from UM. He is one of the students in the Department of English. But before that, please listen what Mr. Yohan will explain
Hello,
later.
everyone.
And for example, there are things that need to be asked regarding the material he conveyed. He will give you a special time to ask questions, namely in the question and answer session, after Mr. Johan delivers all his material exposure to you. Okay, I don't think I need to say much anymore. We just ask you respectfully to come forward to immediately start learning presentation to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yohan Akbar Yudis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yohan Akbar Tira, and I want to present about um, video game narratives, a walkthrough of children's popular culture and formal education by Martinez Borda. So, first of all, the introduction of the video games is, it's a common things in our common life. So video games have an important place in the popular culture of children and adults. Video games can be used as educational tools, focusing on the process of teaching and learning narratives. And also, um, video games, in the contrast to traditional fairy tales, contain a hidden story that players discover at the same time as they are playing the game. And in this context, we can explore the narrative structure of the video games and how they can be used to generate new form of literacy in a digital world. So the main approach combines three parallel, interrelated and mutually informing trajectories: ethnographic, textual, and pedagogical. Consistency, coherence, and mutual relevance in these parallel inquiries will be assured. Regarding video games and other configurative performance as semiotic and cultural tools, we explore their role of the growth of oral, performed, and written narratives. This shows how narrative conventions are present across media boundaries, even considering teachers' unfamiliar platforms. And furthermore, the approach of video games, by considering them in relation to special types of interactive virtual reality, and in the same time as simulation of basic model of real-life experience. And in this context, narrative flow as present in mass media can be described in terms of the way in which incoming perceptual information and the perceptual information relevant to some vital protagonists concern cues to emotional activation linked to the protagonist's preference. So the general aim of this presentation is to explore how video games, supported by conversation and theatrical performance in the classroom, turn into educational instruments. And now let's move on to the background. So one of the important problems which societies face today is the possible effect of the mass media on the generation of violent, sexist, xenophobic situation. In this context, computer games have been charged with generating the situation. Given that one of the primary ecological influence on children is the mass media, and we need to consider how media messages create an environment that can teach people about society rules, attitudes, values, and norms. Institutions transmit their meaning to each new generation through this process. And the media are powerful agents of socialization because they give the public a great deal of information that cannot be confirmed by sources other than themselves. And as you can see in the PowerPoint, computer games can be explored as educational tools for the development of narrative thinking. The recent deep interest in narrative shown by the human science sees in the natural form for human beings to apprehend reality as a lived experience, both real and imaginary narratives, or we can say subjective experience. Through this presentation, we may reconstruct what might have happened, opening up rather than the closing down possibilities. And computer games itself represents one of the most significant cultural emergent forms that affect children leisure time between the age of maybe 8 and 18. We can even predict that their impact in the not in the very distant future will be as important as television is now. In the sense, games generate a new communication scenario in which the classic elements of communication are transformed. Players share not only a form of pleasure and technological skills, but also the specific experience of exploring a different symbolic universe. And the next point is about computer games as cultural and educational tools. Considering computer games as cultural tools, in the most classical sense of this term, we can focus on Vygotsky ideas. So Vygotsky we may say that the child passes through certain stage of cultural development, if each of which is characterized by a different attitude to the external world, by a different way of using objects, and by different way of inventing and using specific cultural devices. This is true whether this be a system elaborated in process of cultural development or a device invented during the individual growth and adaptation. And that is, children learn specific uses of cultural tools, mediated, mediated by other people who take part in social life as members, assuming plenary rights in their community. In this respect, they will be discovering new uses of this instrument associated with a conscious control of their activities. Move on to another main topic is the method, how we can do it. So first, it's about modes of inquiry and study design. The study is based on qualitative analytic perspective based on ecological ethnographic perspective by Castanheira, Crawford, and Dixon in 2001. A microethnographic also of multimodal discourses was also carried out by G and Green 1998. We have presented in detail elsewhere the step that we follow in the generation information and data analysis. And following the methodology of previous studies, the analysis was carried out in several phases, while special attention is paid to the question of the units of analysis. Taking ethnographic and sociolinguistic approaches, we adopted certain methodological principles that should be borne in mind by G and Green in 1998. First, the units of analysis were not isolated individuals so much as activities organized by cultural principle and taking place in the particular social and historical environments, in which participants look for specific goals that make sense of their activities and that are interwoven. And secondly, in order to analyze patterns of activities, we consider the contributes of every participant as being mutually dependent as well as on the context which they arise. And move on to the sources of data, we were working in a multimedia workshop that took place in Spanish public school. Pupils were in their third year of primary education. And the next thing is about principle of analysis. The data were analyzed from an ethnographical perspective. We treat as data the diary documentation produced by researchers and children, including written and audiovisual documentation. A narrative and analytical perspective was combined in our approach to the data. And also, we can come to the result. So the result focusing on three specific points, revealing in different dimensions that influence the use of the video games as educational instruments. So first of all, we detain in how its utilization in the classroom is narrowly related to the goals of participating. In our case, the children, the researcher, and the adults. The way in which they can be used to facilitate the construction of narratives in different situations. And the third is critical discussion. In this case, oriented to thinking about the violence were generated from the game related to its content. And the next is about conclusion and educational importance of the study. So we may come into the end. So video games appear to play an important role in the development of narrative and thought when they are used in relation to a symbolic content that allows children to reflect on specific real-life situation. And in different genre, adventure games possess narrative values that support their effect on reader. Game has historical framework and the basis which it is the actions of the player that develop the argument. The teacher has a very important role to play in transforming a specific tools design for leisure into an educational resource. And the process of dramatizing the history enables children to be aware of their own experience with it. And the final point is video games appear to be an excellent tool to provoke reflection and conversation process, which facilitate moral education as long as the process is supported by the teacher. So thank you. That's all from me. Enjoy.
Thank you for your speech, Mr. Yohan. The conclusion for your speech is first, our units of analysis were not isolated individuals so much as activities organized by cultural principles and taking place in the particular social and historical environments in which participants look for specific goals that make sense of their activities and that are interwoven in turn with social and cultural process. Secondly, in order to analyze patterns of activities, we consider the contributions of every participant as being mutually dependent as well as on the context in which they arise. We looked for methods of experimentation to these activities that allowed us to understand their meaning, depending on the situation in which they appear. So that's all I think, ladies and gentlemen. May I thank you for your participation in this season. I hope you enjoy the program and I look forward to your participation in the future. Thank you.